So, is this Q&A or is it, do I say something?
Just short intro's cool, and we'll do the Q&A afterwards.
Q&A is a lot easier because I don't, these things I don't ever prepare. I found it's best not to, so if I start to ramble, somebody just says, shut up and let's run the movie. You got Yaphet Kotto here, sitting there. I notice most of you spot him. Stand up. Come on, Yaphet, stand up again. And somewhere in here we've got the cinematographer Derek Van Lint. Where are you, Derek? This was also the great idea of Jim Giannopoulos at Fox, who I happened to be at the studio for the last 2 years and enjoying it. Jim's here somewhere. Where are you, Jim? You've got to stand up. Come on, don't be shy. Otherwise, this wouldn't have really happened. Normally, what we are asked to do, directors, I'm asked to get involved in what would be the new output of whatever the new technology is, and of course, I always say yes. In this instance, I thought it was yet another issue of Alien, and Jim said, no, we're going to release it. We're probably going to release it in something like, I don't know, maybe 1,000 theaters here and similar in Europe, which is really a very nice thing to happen after 24 years. It'll be the 25th anniversary. I think the intention is to release somewhere shortly. I think Jim's keeping it a secret, because as always, he's very competitive. Should I say? Halloween. Okay. Anyway, should I stop talking? All right. So we went in, got the original neg, dug it out of the lab, looked at it, and I said, let's print it. And it just shows, it constitutes great cinematographers like Derek, because the negatives stood up pretty good. So we had a first pass print, and it was a little bit like rushes from yesterday. And but we noticed the black was crinkling a teeny bit, but get a little bit fluttery. And the high key scene, funny enough, showed the grain most, which you may notice, Derek. But we then went in digitally and started to do fundamentally frame one regrade, reconstituted, so the disc is, now the negative is a disc, and then you reconstitute back onto celluloid, so marvels of science. And I'm one of those directors who only had to be dragged kicking and screaming towards an Avid desk only, I think, 2 films ago. I would still insist on, I wasn't quite as bad as Stephen, who was still Hollywood movie-ora, I think, and then the chem, or the whatever the flatbed is, but I finally started using technology, having been brought myself to it. What's interesting about the movie, there's no CGI, other than the regrading of the negative. Everything, in those days we didn't have the money. This was made for $8.2 million. Wouldn't they like it now for $8.2 million? The special effects were done by a dear old cameraman called Dinny Ayling, who would be coming to Derek and I saying, I just saw the rushes this morning. He said, you're going to like it. Not a lot, but you're going to like it. We'd then go into the theater and thrash the shit out of him, and then he'd go back and do it again. But fundamentally, the models are, everything you'll see is, I think I'm very proud of it. And in terms of adjustments of story, etc., I went in, and after 25 years of occasionally looking at it, and particularly when you're looking at your regrading for DVD issue, I started to get kind of impatient with preambles, really. If, the beginning of a scene, it would take so long to say, why didn't we move the goddamn camera? Why are we waiting 15 seconds before the move? And I think the idea was being in love with the set and being in love with the lighting process, so I never wanted to cut anything. And so we shaved things. Most of you won't even notice, except there's a slight energy difference. And but shaving, I took out 5 minutes, but I found 5 minutes to 4 minutes and 47 seconds to put back in. And so we're about 26 seconds shorter than we were 25 years ago. I hope you enjoy the movie, and Q&A afterwards. Bye.
So, any questions for Yaphet? The gentleman right there. I should repeat the question. Before this, how
Maybe
long has it
about
been since you've seen it?
10 years. Well, the movie's there now. The whole movie's there. And it's very moving for me. It's moving me so much to me. I cannot tell you. Into the world, 'cause it's a classic. A short story. During the March on Washington, I stood there with, at the steps watching Dr. King talk about his dream and wondered whether or not I would ever see that dream, so far from my goal. And then about 8 years ago, I had some time off from homicide, and I went to D.C. with my daughter, who had played around that ship, my oldest daughter, who run around on that very ship. She's a lawyer today. And we went to the spot where I was standing, and I was telling her how years before I had stood there listening to Dr. King's speech, and a bus pulled up with a bunch of children from Japan, and they got out of the bus and they ran towards me, and I couldn't understand what they were speaking. I was speaking their language. But there was one thing that blew me away, was the fact that they all were saying one word: alien. And at that moment, it was so spooky because I'd realized that the dream had come true. I was now known all throughout the world. The movie opened the door up for women. Never before in the history of movies have we seen a heroic woman do what Sigourney did. And all other movies after that portrayed women in those heroic roles. And it was the first time an African American had been seen in a role like that. And so today we see women and African Americans in those heroic roles because of this man right here. Thank you, Ridley. God bless you.
And I'd now like to welcome Ridley Scott to the stage. Who's next? Gentleman right there.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, most directors, they tend to actually, oh, thank you. Most directors, they tend to look at the canvas as white and start painting it. But you seem to be unafraid of shadow, and water seems to run a regular theme in your films. I'm just wondering if you do that purposely, or is it just like, you tend to want to use minimalist ways of approaching to light when you're using them during film. I'm just wondering if you can speak to that.
Yeah. Remember, it's 24 years ago. And, followed through on probably something like 2,000 commercials, and I'd already done a film, Duelists. And so, you know, one was just exploring the techniques that we'd all resolved and dissolved and been through every filter under the sun you could possibly imagine through the process of television commercials. And it always amused me when the critics criticized the Duelists for having been over-gauzed, and in fact it was clean as a whistle. There's no gauze on at all, so it just shows not what they know, right? and the alien, again, was not you know, tricked up in any way. It was just Derek's beautiful lighting, and we'd actually worked quite closely on building in, you know, the practicals in the sets to, you know, be able to be used for lighting within the corridors, where Derek, with the production designer, worked out a switch-on, switch-off system as and when we needed them for, you know, because the light in that claustrophobic environment from the floor is pretty tricky. But as I think most of the part, my experience with Derek up to then was on commercials. We always kind of liked the light either through windows or from the floor, rarely from above, which tend to be more television. But as to the minimalist approach, that was it then, actually. You know, that's the way it was, and gradually somebody invented the shaky camera, and now we've shaky cameraed out, and we're back to hopefully, you know, straightforward, whatever that is. I mean, I've just done a film here which is Matchstick Man. There's no shaky camera except one moment when he has a bad turn. But that was the current style, not of anything else. It was where I was at that point in the way I wanted things to be. And then gradually that changed. And you go into the ultimate process in my career of shaky camera with Black Hawk Down. You know, I've still got white noise in this right here. I can't hear a bloody thing here. So, you know, you evolve. You go through evolutions of, you know, finally wringing it dry, and then you back off and you start on something else. You start on another direction.
Directing films and directing commercials are pretty much similar. They're very exact in their approach. I'm just wondering, since film deals with character and plot, where commercials are pretty much the product itself, how is it you're able to actually say that one actually is similar to the other, and if actually doing all those commercials helped you as a filmmaker?
Technology, technique, lighting technique. I mean, by the time I did the Duels was a pretty straightforward experience. And that's why now my job basically is about reading and trying to find material that's going to satisfy my needs. And I spend most of my time now working with writers, because once you have the blueprint down, which is really the hardest thing, a good script is the hardest thing to find, the rest is pretty straightforward and fun. If you haven't got the 3 acts down before you begin, it does not become fun, not when you catch yourself up and suddenly realize, where do we go tomorrow? Then we have a lot of pages being written overnight, which I hand to a gentleman like this and escape out the trailer as fast as possible.
Can you just talk a bit about why the nest scene was cut out in the first place, and why you felt it was appropriate to put it back?
I think this question there is of, you know, style of where you work at that point. At that moment, I would, right through every commercial, right through the first film and this one, I would work always very closely with the editor. I've gradually evolved in the style of working because I found that you became blunt. You blinded yourself with sitting there choosing every frame, every take, and I know I've got it. By the time I've said, okay, next setup, check the gate, next setup, I know I've got it. I got it in somewhere, in either the number of takes that I've printed. I don't want to go back in the editing room and then really melt down and blunt myself by then sitting through the process of editorial process, because then I'm going to be more useful to the editor. Presume the editor's well chosen. You've got a very good editor in this film, Terry Rawlins, and let him get on with it. So in the meantime, you're editing while you're in progress of filming, shooting the film. Let him make decisions and choices. That's my way of working, providing you choose a good editor. Then when the scene's ready, they'll say, you want to pop in and have a look after shooting? So I pop and have a look, and usually it's pretty well gone as planned. Later, I know we'll adjust and tighten, and I know when I'm looking and I think, I'm sure there's a better take of that, I'm sure there's a better take of that. I can check that later. Then it becomes, okay, it seems to be in place, move on. It's all about not getting blunt, keeping sharp, keeping pragmatic, the editing process, right throughout the whole process of making the movie, actually. So, you've got 17 minutes of where everything's flying, and the dynamics are terrific. Everyone's dead, including Yaphet, and that was hard to kill him. And Sigoni's on her own. And so the 17 minutes seemed to be great dynamics, and I went for that, and I tried that scene in and out and in and out, and I thought, well, it doesn't obstruct, it intrudes. And having looked at it recently, in the last year, I thought, oh, it actually works pretty well. So back it goes.
In the Alien series as a whole, we find 2 intertwining themes. One of Ripley as a mother figure. First she's got the cat and then Newt. And then she becomes a mother to the alien.
You got a cell phone near you? Sorry?
I'll
Can you-
tell
okay,
you. 'Cause
right.
So then she becomes mother to the alien as a whole. And we also see her as a martyr figure because it takes over her life and it destroys her utterly. So I'm wondering if you had thought about that when you were making the first film yourself and what you think about how that expanded in the whole four movies.
What I thought about what?
About how that played out within the 4 movies altogether.
Mother figure.
And the martyr, so that the intertwining
Martyr.
of the two.
No, that never came into my scope of my intellect. I just wanted to do a, hard-nosed film that will scare the shit out of you. Right.
Hello. Scott seems to have done every single genre at least once. I was wondering if you ever plan to go back to the science fiction thriller genre ever again.
Can you say that again?
You seem to have directed many genres of film in your career so far. I was wondering if Ridley Scott and Scott Free would ever go back to the science fiction thriller genre again.
Yeah, if I can find a script. It's all about material, everything. Who was it? Hitchcock said that. Said about script. And that's what it definitely is, that. And I think what I came out the box with was 2 sci fiction elements, which were, one was in space, then the next one was urban. So in a funny kind of way, I kind of exorcised the styles that I needed to get out about space and city. And then ever after that, I've been looking for science fiction, but it's going to have to be the story. And therefore, I'm now going to lean much more heavily on the story because we've had such a dearth of science fictions over the last few years. Too much, really. Including, God bless them, Star Trek do it still 3 times a week, don't they? Is it? Or twice a week? Yeah. They've definitely squeezed out every goddamn shape of every kind of spaceship you can possibly imagine, including shoulder sizes, okay? And including the heads and the makeup.
And one black guy in all the cast.
Exactly. And it kind of wrings it dry, so you're looking continuously towards really great material. Script.
Actually, I wanted to ask about the casting because it's truly phenomenal cast. How did that come together?
Can you hear? Is that close enough? All right. Can you hear? Okay. The casting was as usual. You adjust and change over the years. With experience, you become more sure. I'm now 2-take Charlie. He'll walk in the room, I'll go, yes, okay, right. As opposed to 40-take Charlie, then it's the same with casting. You start to know who's out there. And then if you want to find somebody new, which is always interesting, I always try and invigorate or reinvigorate the business with finding new people as well. And in those days, because it was the second film, and therefore the first one had really been done in England, and I had 2 Americans in the lead, but the rest were English cast. I knew English cast, but I didn't know American cast. And this would be mainly an American cast because for an American marketplace. So when I came into cast in LA and New York, I drove the casting director crazy about wanting to see everyone. And because I didn't really know, I mean, of course I've seen lots of American movies, but I wanted to see everyone who was in the firing range, who was going to be in the, who was going to be in the most interesting. Because I saw it as a kind of blue-collar science fiction movie. And Yaphet and Harry Dean were written as a great relief, really, as below the deck. The system that the below the decks always thinks the suits on the top deck are idiots, and so we even have that little social order or disorder. So it was a matter of looking, and then finally going, putting all the pictures up on the walls, and then finally saying, there. So chosen with great care and attention.
I'm trying to get somebody.
Hello? Okay, sorry, cut it. I have a question. How much did you ever actually work with H.R. Geiger in designing the alien, or did
Yep.
you just kind of hand you a picture of it and say this is what you have to work around? Did
No, no. Can you hear me? Okay. Giger doesn't want to fly, hates flying, and would not leave Switzerland. So I had to fly into Switzerland to see him, and to Zurich, and met him in his house, very strange house, which was. And he was dressed in those days, which was unusual. He was entirely in black, and the house was filled with Giger artifacts. And at this moment, I'd seen Necronomicon, and I'd seen what I thought was the alien in Necronomicon. And when I met with Giger, he said, "Yes, but we can do something else, much more interesting, And I said, yeah, sure. And then I persuaded him to get the train I think he got the train from Switzerland to England. And I thought he would want to stay in some grand hotel, but he didn't. He stayed in a little room, or a couple of rooms over a pub in Shepperton Village. He was there 9-10 months, and I can draw, and he can really draw. And so I knew the first argument was about what the big boy would look like, and I thought this Necronomicon shot was incredible. It was the most beautiful version of anything like that, threatening alien. If you're going to do an alien, there it was. And I just stuck to my gun and said, no. He said, but I can change this. I said, no, that's great. And we built him he had a stage. In those days, a 10,000 square foot stage, which was a vast studio. So we cut it in half and gave him a 5,000 square foot lockup. And in there he had his bones and his skulls and his gristle and his sinews. And he would be in there all day with Mia, his assistant, basically trying to build a full-sized model of this guy, or this creature that you see, this beautiful creature that you see at Necronomicon. So that was in process. So, if you've got it, don't fix it. And that's always my opinion. And one of the biggest problems I had, apart from the fact I thought the script was terrific, biggest concern for me wasn't casting the movie, it was having the bad guy. It was having the alien. How bad can this creature be? Because if we hadn't had a really interesting beast, then you'd have had half the movie. And so he would build this full-size, full-scale, almost 7 feet tall model and refine it on a daily basis. Meanwhile, we were getting on with the other things, like the face hugger, the chest burster, the egg, and the only thing that Giger had a problem with was the chest burster. And he designed something one day. Great frustration appeared in my office with this large black bag over his arm. He's obviously hiding something. And he said, so, I've done it. I said, so what's it look like? And he said, do you want to see it now? I said, sure. Okay. So slowly peels back this black bag. And it actually looked like he stuck his hand, if you excuse the expression, up the ass of a turkey. There was this lumpy turkey with his teeth at the end, and he just looked at me like that, saying, no good, huh? I said, don't think so. I'm trying to work out how I get that inside of John Hurt's chest. It's like a 24-pound turkey. He said, okay, this is impossible. I can't get that. I must concentrate on all the other things. So we then brought in this guy, Roger Dickin. Actually lived out near Windsor somewhere. Again, lived in a house that looked like Dracula lived in. It was, all these guys are really bizarre. Sorry. And anyone who's a special effects person, prosthetic person, I didn't really mean that. And we came up with a beast, the little beast that came out the chest. Other than that, Giger was brilliant. Always on time, ahead of the game, and brought in finally Carlo Rambaldi to build the mechanics of the head, really, because eventually the difficulty was how do you put in those days you don't have that latex strength to put over a skinny enough body, because that's all I can do. I've got no CGI to build the creature. Now you can, trigger it into the CGI and you just paint the thing.
Okay. I must confess that this was
it's always more, you know, it's always more scary if you can't really see it. The perception, the anticipation. You notice there's a cadence in the movie, in the pace of the movie, where that is almost as important as the shock moments, because it's the build-up to that, and then the reaction, shock reaction to that. There's a few really cheap tricks in here, actually. And Jaws, I always felt, funny enough, in Jaws, the thing that Stephen did, he must have had it in and out and in and out, is never show that fish on the back of the boat. You didn't need it. And that was the only thing in Jaws which I felt, you obviously wanted to show the size of the beast, but by then, God almighty, I was fully convinced. I still haven't been back in the sea. And to see it sitting on the back to weigh the trawler down seemed to be unnecessary. So I felt less was better, always, always.
Sorry, if I could jump in. Yaphet, what did you think when you first saw the beast?
Well, I first saw it in that scene. We had not seen the.
Wouldn't let him see it.
When we came into the set that day, we noticed that everything was covered up and people were hiding behind plastic things and all the rest of it. But we had no idea as to what was going to happen. And when it did happen, those reactions you see there is totally real. And you know, I had done a number of movies up to that time, and James Bond and all this kind of stuff, and fancied myself to be this New York actor. We all went away after that scene, started to question what kind of lives that we had lived and what really did this to us. But this man is he's quite, he knows, the script, he told me when I first got the script, don't let the script deceive you because it's so simple. And then he handed me a manual, which I think I have somewhere at home, of Parker. And there was so much stuff about that character. Each one of the actors had a background on the characters they're going to play that was in depth. I mean, you really knew it was just a serious, because there was more about Parker that I had that they put together, who he was, where he came from, what he did. And so I had a wealth of stuff to pull out of that manual to apply to that simple script, which was very, very tricky, because it's very simple. The words are very simple, but it's deceptive because you've got to stay behind the word and let the action take you where, if you can't add to it because it's already there. It's a dangerous thing to do, but it's, with a man like this, you've had so much about Parker in the manual that you could apply it to. And all the actors had the manuals of characters, of those characters there. I still have the manual at home. It's quite extensive. It's what he did, where he came from, and everything about him.
Harry said to me, I didn't go to Ohio University. Doesn't matter, Harry, it's just a brief. Right? It's just for you, mate. I didn't go to university. Right.
Do you have a mic there?
Hi. Question about the chest scene. How much did the other actors know about what was really going to happen when it happened, when you shot it?
You can hide so much, but obviously what I didn't want to do is have them get used to it, and then suddenly, during the scene, one of them suddenly burst out laughing. Because that, and I think what was key was to make it always fresh.
I didn't know what to expect to come out. The thing just jumped out of there and it blew my mind. Stay with me for a long time. This character was very difficult to play. I did a film called Blue Collar, which was kind of like, but it wasn't like this guy here. This was the hardest film I had to do. This was hard. This was not easy, in terms of keeping focus on what was happening within each scene and carrying the energy from the scene before into the next scene, and not go up or down. It was just a difficult thing. They keep concentrating because of some of the stuff. But when I look at this work here, God, this movie is a classic. It's unbelievable. And the bad thing about what has happened with Alien is that every single movie that I have seen since Alien is Alien. Have you noticed that? I don't see anything different from Alien. I mean, it's just they try to write, they try to copy us, and we even took some of the camera technique into Homicide of the moving camera. And it's completely infected the entire world, our industry, the way we look at things, science fiction. I don't believe there's ever going to be anything like it again.
You know, there's somebody here tonight I've already introduced, and I thought he'd be here, Derek Van Lint. Do you want to come up? After 3 questions. Yeah.
I'm going to have you sit here. Let me sit here. No, you sit down somewhere.
I can stand up. Oh, you? Yeah, I'll stand. It's fine. We can do one more question.
Hello.
Oh, I got the mic over here. Oh, maybe not.
Yeah. First, I want to commend you for the director's cut. It's fantastic. But I wanted to ask just about the question of the director's cut itself. And, like, I mean, we're seeing a lot of these movies now from the 60s, 70s, whatever, that are being revised or adjusted in some way or another. And I wanted to sort of just ask, how do you sort of set the rules for yourself in terms of adding footage or not adding footage? And is there a certain point where we should decide whether to update the film or just accept it warts and all?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I always get involved in every update of any movie I do, on, as I said earlier, about what you get to do is get the opportunity to try and, put the stake in the ground to say, I'm going to try and save the film for another 25 years, right? And fortunately, the new digital process, I think, is a pretty good way of doing it. So when you do that, after big lengths of time, you look at it, why not adjust something if you think it's not quite right? I mean, after all, it's got to respond to now, today, and therefore if audiences are going to get impatient with the pacing of today, then they're going to lose interest, except for very, very, very few people. So I think it's fine. There's no problem with that.
I'm afraid we've got to wrap it up. But,
Maybe Derek likes to say something.
I've worked on a lot of commercials with Ridley before I did Alien. Ridley said it was a very good script, but I received the script from Evil Powell. I remember phoning you and mentioned a couple of things in it which I thought was a bit hokey. I said, is that right? Right? He said, no, once we got the money, we'll make our own picture. One of the things, I saw somebody stand up and do a lot of spiel on Black Hawk Down when he won an Oscar for cutting. And having worked and having seen the way Ridley works, nobody in front or behind the camera can ever claim total authorship for their role in that movie. You are totally molded, right, into making a movie. It's truly, kind of a film unit effort, but with a very, very specific, driven person doing that. I'm not brown-nosing. I don't want to do a picture. I can't stop not laughing for that long.
Can I add something here? Derek is absolutely correct. One of the things that the kind of work that Ridley does is that Sigourney and I were, we were all friends, but during the course of the shooting, Ridley said to me, Yaphet, stop being so friendly with Sigourney, we've got to do the last scene. And so off camera, I had to stop being friendly with Sigourney. And it was killing me. And I went back to Ridley and I said, really, I don't know, man. She thinks I'm really mad with her. He said, Yaphet, you got to stick with it. And I did. And so this kind of thing was going on off camera. And I drove her crazy. I stopped speaking to her at lunch, and we were in a makeup room. I'd leave when she came in, and I could see the anger. And finally, when she got to that scene when she had to explode, she exploded. And it was not just acting. She wanted to tear my head off at that point. And that's the kind of the actor's studio kind of work that goes on behind the camera. So everything was focused into one. It never stops with Ridley.
I
It
really,
keeps
rem-
going.
yeah, I really remember Veronica clocking Sagoni outside that room. It didn't work about 4 or 5 times. And somebody had obviously had a word with Veronica, who's a fantastic actress, right? And she came down, nearly knocked Ripley's head off. That was great. Right? Yeah. There's another lovely story with Yaphet. We'd only just started the picture. We're doing a shot. Ridley operates most of the stuff, virtually all the stuff. I was doing B camera. I was laying down on the floor, looking up at Yaphet, very low angle. Ian Holm walked up behind me. I worked with Ian before. And he says, what are all the names on the back of the camera for, Del? And I said, I keep forgetting their names, right? And at the kind of end of the take, when his call's cut, fine, Ian says to Yaphet, hey, Yaph, he keeps forgetting your name. And Yaphet walks up, foot about 4 inches from my face, and said, you can always try calling me boy.
I'm afraid we have to wrap up. Thank you.
Okay,